All right, you're live.
Welcome in a Friday with Campo and Joe. We love jumping back into your Jaguar world twice a week. We do our Tuesday podcast, and now we have got our Friday show as well streaming to you. So, welcome in Jacksonville, all of Duval, outside of the 904. If you're a Jaguar fan and you just happen to hit this link, we appreciate it. Joe C. from XL Primetime, afternoons 2 to 4 on the Superstation. And that man right there is our head coach, Dave Campo. Coach, you're looking good. You're feeling good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be on with the masses again today.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk to them, okay? Let's give them a little bit of a Jaguar discussion on a Friday. And by the way, this is right in the middle of March Madness, but we know just how crazy Jaguar fans are. They want to talk about football instead of basketball, especially after, I'm just guessing here, Coach, your bracket is busted because you picked Kansas to go deep in the tournament.
Absolutely. And listen, it didn't surprise me in the least because they've struggled all year. And they struck out on the portal, and that's what happens. If you can't shoot the threes, you can't win, and that's in today's game. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Florida does, though. I mean, obviously, I'm a Florida half native now, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they do.
Well, hopefully they get on a roll. They're going to tip sometime around, it says 6:50 tonight, but sometime I would guess after 7 o'clock. All right, so we got a lot to get to, and I feel like we really need to drill down on a couple of transactions that the Jaguars have made here, and let's kind of pair things up from the free agency part of the offseason, and then we're going to start looking towards the draft, which is coming up in just a few short weeks. But you and I talked on Tuesday about basically going through all the free agent signings and what they had to say and what James Gladstone had to say last week. But in between Tuesday's podcast and today, Coach, while we're talking Jaguar football, Fred Johnson was also an offensive lineman that the Jags have brought in. Now, he played tackle up in Philadelphia. He played tackle in a reserve role and was forced into a starting role, did okay. He's a former Gator. He comes here to Jacksonville along with a handful of the other, you might call them mid-level signings. And then, of course, Patrick McCary is considered, I would think, an upper-level signing. But the bottom line is, Coach, they have created competition at every single position, it sounds to me like, on this offensive line.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think what the key thing for me, and I think we're probably going to talk about rankings of free agency and as we go along here, but I'm going to say this. They have put their money where their mouth, the mouth where their money is, or vice versa, because, they've gone out. They said that they needed help in the offensive line. They wanted to make sure there was competition. They wanted to make sure that there was a physical toughness presence with this group. And I think that's what they went out and did. They didn't hit the splash, but at the same time, you look at McCary, we've already talked about that, but you look at Fred Johnson now, arguably the Philadelphia Eagles had maybe one of the top 3 or 4 offensive lines in the league. He came in for 6 ball games and didn't skip a beat with that group. So you have to look at him and say, hey, this guy fits in nicely with that group. He's big, physical, and from what I understand, a smart player. So, I'm glad we have him, and it's going to be a position battle, in my opinion. I don't think anybody in that offensive line is safe, to be perfectly honest with you, including Walker Little at left tackle. So I think it's going to be an interesting OTA and training camp this year.
All right, Coach, let's just stay there on the Walker Little conversation, because I do think a lot of Jaguar fans know that he had his extension given to him late in the year. It might have been a Trent Baalke move to say, hey, we found a guy that we've given a second contract to, and that easily could have been one of the kind of ulterior motives that Trent Baalke might have had. But Walker Little has been installed as basically the presumptive starter. Maybe that's, I was going to say preemptive, but presumptive starter at the left tackle position, and Anton Harrison's plugged in at the right tackle position. Neither one of these guys necessarily played a full season or their best season this past year, okay? Because Walker came in after the Cam Robinson trade. Anton Harrison was there the entire time on the right side, but didn't have his best year, especially since he had such a strong rookie year. So you're telling me, and I agree with you, but you're telling me that this competition is going to be opened up and nothing is going to be taken for granted as far as starters.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And let me just say this: both of those guys you just mentioned have the tools, have all the tools. The question is that intangible, intrinsic intangibles. That's the area that's going to be tested, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to hold back. Whenever they have an opportunity, they do some hitting in training camp, they're going to do it. I think they're going to find out who, and, you could go right on down the line, even Hainsey, who, started for a couple of years and then got beat out last year by the rookie that they drafted at Tampa Bay. Mm-hmm. You look at his one game, they said it, you're going to see a guy finishing at the whistle. So I think, everybody in that locker room, including other positions, but especially in the offensive line, there's going to be a battle. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they don't take a couple guys in the draft.
Oh, I agree. They have to install youth in this depth chart and quit reaching for guys in the free agent part of the offseason. There's nothing wrong with plugging in some guys right now and trying to get value and experience and not signing the most expensive guy out there. But they need to live in April with success in the draft, making sure that they're bringing guys in that are developable, guys like you coaching them and making sure that they become a better and more of a permanent fixture for this football team. So Fred Johnson played every game the last 2 years with Philadelphia, 6 starts this past season. With the Super Bowl champs. He has been in Pittsburgh. He's been in Cincinnati, Tampa Bay, going all the way back to the Steelers, signing him in 2019 as an undrafted free agent. He played at Florida. He was a good lineman for them, started 32 games for them. But you're now looking at a guy that can come in at least with a little bit of pride and pursuit to own a starting job. He tasted 6 starts last year, Coach. So I don't think he's coming in going, hey, I understand my role. He's going to come in and compete.
Absolutely. And I think Adoga, the kid that they brought in from Dallas, is going to feel the same way. This is a new start for him. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised. You've heard me say this before. I'd probably say it too much. But Paul Boudreaux, who was offensive line coach here with Jacksonville, who I felt is one of the best offensive line coaches while he was in the NFL, says, give me 5 tackles and I'll teach one of them to snap and the other 2 can play guard. And there's no guarantee that either one of these guys won't go in and play guard. We don't know that. We don't know the actual ability level and exactly what they're looking for, but there's no question about the competition, which we've already talked about.
All right, so let's just run through them just for a hot minute here. You got Walker Little, you got Anton, presumptive starters, as we said. Ezra Cleveland, second year of a new contract that he got coming out of last year. He certainly has not dazzled anybody with his play. They bring in Chuma Adoga, one of the guys from Dallas that you mentioned. You've got Robert Hainsley. You might plug him in right now as your starting center. You got McCary from Baltimore plugged in as your right guard. Then let's just at least hit a couple of these backups. We mentioned Johnson. We mentioned Adoga. Luke Fortner is still part of this. Cooper Hodges is still part of this. Cole Van Lanen, yeah, at least for the here and now. And then you can throw a couple of other guys. Let's mention Javon Foster right now. Where does he fit into this whole deal? Because, Coach, he was a 4th-round draft pick last year, and we didn't see him. We expected he might be looked at as an interior lineman, even though he started at tackle for a bunch of ball games for the Missouri Tigers. But where do you see some of these other guys?
Well, first of all, I think that they've made a decision that, and they did, tender Van Lanen because Van Lanen was probably the best backup lineman they had last year. Cooper Hodges is injury prone, has had some problems. I'm hearing that there's a possibility that he might, not go forward in his career for very long. And so when you look at those guys, I think this new group coming in, it's going to be, there's nobody safe. Foster, I don't know about Foster. That's usually when you get a new staff in, they look at actually harder than the guys on the old staff, because the old staff guys, obviously, when they're not successful as a team, there's some questions about those guys. And you have a tendency to look at your own guys better than you do some of the guys that are out there. So we might have overrated a guy like Foster or a guy like Van Lanen or some of those guys in comparison to what this group sees as a coaching staff. Mm-hmm. So I think nobody's safe. As I said earlier, there's going to be some guys leaving us here right after OTAs and training camp.
Yeah, I'm all for it. What was the old line, John McKay? What about execution? I'm all for it. And so this football team needs to find guys that can do their job. It's a classic mano-a-mano situation. Leon Searcy says it all the time on XL Primetime. Beat your man, that guy in front of you. And in particular, when we're talking about what's going on with this offensive line.
Let me tell you a quick story. Uh-huh. Okay. I saw a show the other day with the Cowboys, okay? And I don't know how many people are familiar with the old-time Cowboys, but I'll say this. Nate Newton was one of the offensive linemen in a really good offensive line, 3 Super Bowl champion, right? Mm-hmm. And I was listening to Larry Brown, my DB, on this show, and he said, he's talking about Newton. And he said, here we are. We're going in training camp. We're hitting every day. We're battling up front, and Nate's all banged up. He's got 2 braces on the knees. He's still foaming at the mouth. So he said, Larry asked him, he said, Nate, why don't you take a break? You never come out. Why are you not there? He says, have you seen Larry Allen sitting behind me? That's what competition does. Larry Allen became he's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. And so, if you got that kind of mentality, which this group is going to try to bring that out in these guys, it's going to be a battle. I'm really excited about looking at it.
Yeah, you've got to create competition. You've got to make guys feel uncomfortable. It's your job as either the head coach, as you were, a coordinator, or a position coach, that you have got to get everything out of every individual. And so James Gladstone, the general manager, is coming in here. He's basically saying, you know what? This team's underperformed. Okay, you can't go 3-10 in 1-score games and feel pretty good about yourself. That means you got it down to the wire. You got it within reason. It's what the NFL is. It's a bunch of 1-score games, but you better win more than you lose. And so this football team is going to be challenged, I hope, at every level. On the roster, can you make it? Starter, can you keep it? And then starters, reserves, everybody, can you win some damn football games? Because I think that's what it boils down to. Your collection of talent has got to beat that collection of talent every Sunday.
Right.
Let's get to a couple of these numbers and see what you think. This is from ESPN Research. And by the way, as we come to you on Fridays, hopefully you guys will get used to seeing us and chiming in. So you guys feel free. There's a little chat box. You guys can jump in and give us some comments. But this is from ESPN Research. Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are now gone. Trevor Lawrence, you would easily say those were 2 of his favorite targets. You agree with that, Coach?
Yes.
Yeah. Security blankets through and through. Yeah. Guys that would either find the first down marker or the middle of the field. They would just find little soft spots in the zone and they would make plays. So ESPN Research, when targeting Kirk and Ingram since 2022, Trevor was 70+% in completion percentage, 70.2% of his passes, 21 touchdown passes, 10 interceptions, and the off-target percentage was below 15%. And here's the other part of it. He got rid of the ball, according to ESPN Research, in less than 2.5 seconds. Let me give you the other. Well, actually, let's just stop there, and then I'll give you the other numbers in a second. What do you think when you hear that? We're talking about Trevor feeling confident with the guys he was throwing it to, and the guys that were catching it were good.
Well, there's 2 things. Number one, that's a pretty good percentage. And you got to feel like there's no question that the talent level was there with those 2 guys. And I think Gladstone made that clear, that the decision making, when they made the decisions on who they were going to trade or keep or whatever, that was no indictment on the two guys, and he made it clear on those two guys. So from that standpoint, I think we got a little worse when that happened, from the standpoint that obviously they were guys that Trevor leaned on a little bit. Now, the second thing it tells me is that they're going to put their people that they feel that are going to give him the best opportunity to use everybody that's on the roster. And that means getting the offensive line squared away so that he can not only hit those 70%, which are usually short passes, crossing routes, all those kind of things, to give him an opportunity to get the ball down the field to a guy like Thomas or Diani Brown that they just brought in, that's a speedy guy. So their decision was, they're not questioning the ability level of those two guys, but they're looking for the future of what can be done with Trevor Lawrence by putting a number of guys around him that he can use the entire field. And that starts with protection and the ability to run the football. And that's what they've done. And they made it clear. They said, we just felt in order to give us an opportunity to raise the floor with the entire units, we had to make some decisions on getting rid of some guys that were really pretty good football players, but not in the vision that we see going forward.
Yeah, you've got to have the type of player that you think can be dynamic when asked to make plays on the football field. I want to get to the other half of these numbers, but I just want to remind everybody, and Jaguar fans know this, Trevor Lawrence has got to play better. People around him have got to be better. It should add up to more success. But right now, for Trevor's career, he is averaging just over one passing touchdown per game. If you're going to be a generational player, if you're going to be a superstar, you cannot average 1.13 passing touchdowns per game. And that is where he's at. And so everybody has got to be better, including him. All right, so I gave you the numbers, Coach. I love it because if you're over 70%, you're basically throwing 2-to-1 touchdowns to interceptions. You're not throwing the ball inaccurately too often, less than 15% there. You're getting rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds. All that stuff is awesome. Now let me give you the other numbers. According to ESPN research, when targeting any other player on the field, he's less than 62%. He has 36 touchdown passes to 19 interceptions. Off target goes over 15%, and he's holding the ball basically about a little more than a half a second longer. So in that neighborhood. So those are the numbers. Very simple. Brian Thomas is an emerging guy. He can definitely up his ante in terms of completion percentage and touchdown passes versus interceptions with him. But what else do you see when you hear those numbers?
Well, I think that reinforces what I just said with the second part, because to me, you can't win with just throwing the ball 5 yards down the field, 10 yards down the field. You got to be able to make some throws down the football field. And to me, when we had the problem, we could not run the football. So now all of a sudden, every 90% of the situations they were in with where him throwing the football was on 3rd and long, 2nd and long. Now you got to hold the ball a little longer because the routes have got to change. They've got to get the ball down the field. And I don't mean takeoffs and all that stuff. I'm just talking about the intermediate areas, the 20-yard passes, the 15-yard passes down the field. So to me, they felt that they needed to firm up the situation to where he has the ability they have the ability to run the football and give him some more time off of play action, some of those kind of things, to where they can get the ball down the field. But it also tells me that they're probably going to do some damage in the receiver core as well in the draft. And that's an area that I think you're going to see us grab a couple guys, and we'll see where that plays out.
Yeah, so let's just kind of finish our conversation for today on that subject, because now that this football team has made a few moves, nothing dramatic or drastic, but we talked about the free agents that they brought in, and they add one more offensive tackle for competition, but they're stuck right now on Brian Thomas Jr. Gabe Davis. Those are the two cats that you're looking at as far as either a high draft pick or a top signing, which was Gabe Davis a season ago as a free agent. And then you got Parker Washington, a later round draft pick that has to turn into something. He has to basically become Kirk. De'Ami Brown can definitely be an outside guy and also appear in the slot from time to time. But I couldn't help but look at these numbers, Coach. Gabe Davis, who we know they handed him a decent paycheck in the offseason to come in here. He's from Fernandina. He's won a first coast zone, went to UCF, and you certainly can root like hell for him. But his totals last year, Coach, 20 catches, 239 yards. He had a knee injury. He was gone for the last little over half dozen games, 7 games that he missed. But let's just add that up, Coach. That's 10 games that he played, averaging 2 catches and about 24 yards a game. That is no bueno. That is unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you make decisions sometimes that don't work out necessarily. We got rid of a guy that was actually more productive than he was in Jones.
You're going back to Marvin Jones, yeah.
No, I'm talking. Yeah, I'm talking about the receiver.
Tim Jones when they let him go.
Not Tim, the one we got rid of to bring this guy in to bring.
Yeah,
Marvin Jones' son.
Jones Jr. Yeah.
Anyway, he has not been productive, so you can't really count on it. He was productive in Buffalo, so you're hopeful that he can come on. But they've also made it clear that they are going to not have a bunch of old veterans in some areas to where you can't get a young player on the field and develop. And so, they're going to have to, I think when you look at the roster, you're going to look at a defensive line and you're going to look at receiver of the two areas where they're going to try to make the most damage in the draft.
Yeah, because there's just not a lot behind these guys. You start looking at where you're going to plug guys in, and Davis will definitely be part of it. But you're looking at guys you're basically hoping like heck that they'll be able to give you something. There's nothing proven there at all when you're talking about Josh Cephas and my man training camp Trammell and David White Jr. and the other guys that are there. There's nothing that you can hang your hat on right now that basically says you're going to be okay in that position. So they absolutely 100% have to make sure that they get a high draft pick at that wide receiver position. Let's at least finish our discussion on that part real quick. How high are you willing to go for wide receiver? Are you willing to look at Ted McMillan, who ran a sub 4.5 at his size with his pro day the other day? Are you willing to go with a guy like that as the 5th pick overall?
I think it depends on, first of all, if there are other guys available, for example, Mason Graham or Hunter, or, I don't think that they will take that pick at 5. Now, if the quarterbacks are still available and somebody wants to come up to 5, I could see them backing off of 5, and somewhere in the top 10, you might consider a McMillan. But there's some question about McMillan, and I think he's a good receiver. But there's actually some question of off-field intangibles with him, from what I'm hearing out there. So my personal opinion is I think he would be very good for us as a on the other side away from Thomas, but I don't think he's a top 10 selection, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I could see a scenario if they were that enamored with him, maybe look and see how this quarterback position plays out. Let somebody maybe jump up there. They could move back, maybe collect another opportunity a little later in the either maybe second round, something like that, and be able to get an offensive lineman. They've got a decent number of picks, 10 total in the draft, and 4 of them are pretty dang high. And so, yeah, it's either going to come down to that receiver that they're dying to get their hands on to add to Brian Thomas Jr. And everybody else that they've got, or they're looking at the very simple fact that they have not addressed the interior defensive line, and you got to go Mason Graham, right?
Well, I think they have to get better on defense. And right now, when I say defensive line, I'm also talking about edge.
Yeah.
Because, you need to have a group that you can count on. And we do have some young players. We have Mason Smith, who I think has got a chance to be a pretty good football player. Okay. But we don't know at this point. And, he was I don't know if he was hurt or not hurt, but he was inactive a number of times, and he kind of came on towards the end of the year. So I'm counting on him a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, you're in the same boat that you were in offensively. You got to find some guys that can be that third pass rusher, or you got to manufacture them. I could even see them taking the linebacker if he's a dual guy that can play inside and outside. Carter or Campbell. There's some guys there. You just don't know what direction they're going to go with that fifth pick. But they've got to get better on defense as well. They can't put everything on the offensive side.
No, because they gave up too many and they didn't score enough. And both of them are bad. Okay, I don't care how you add it up. If you are not moving the chains and owning the clock, you're going to wear your defense out. Defense is going to start to sag and give up big plays, which is exactly what happened. And neither side was helping the other side at all. And you mentioned Abdul Carter, I can't imagine falling to 5, but if he did, there would be a conversation. You can mention Jahad Campbell from Alabama, the linebacker that you like. Who knows exactly where he'll be. And then you can take a look at either Graham, or if you were to go wide receiver, let Kenneth Grant, that other big human being from Michigan, maybe fit in the second round. That's a possibility. So all those things, it's going to be fun, isn't it?
Yes, I'm excited. It reminds me a little bit of the old Cowboys when we came in. We had an old unit, but we had the most draft picks of any team in the league for 2 straight years. And the Herschel Walker trade obviously helped us there. But, that's great. You got an opportunity. The more draft picks you have, the better chance you have to wheel and deal or hit on guys. I'm just hopeful that, that our guys, we've got the most for 2 straight years now. Let's use them, and let's use them wisely. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, wisely. That's the best part of it right there. All right, you're wise. We always love your intel. We'll wrap it up by saying that the guy you were trying to dig for, Zay Jones. That's the one that you were trying to remember.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm getting a little older. My memory goes every once in a while, and his father's the only one I could remember, Robert Jones, who played for me in Dallas.
But listen, I didn't help you because I took you back to Marvin and skipped on Zay.
You had Tim Jones on the mind. That also shows me something, by the way, before we get out of here. Special teams is great, and Tim Jones was an outstanding special teams guy. But they made the move there because they're going to get the best 22 first, and then they're going to fill it in with those special teams guys.
Exactly. That's when you go get a Josh Cephas or somebody like that you've already drafted, who is big, strong, fast, all that type of stuff. Let him become your next cat. Don't have what are we talking about? 6 years in the league, something in that neighborhood for Tim Jones, but. And they put him in position where he needed to make a big play or two, and he's only made 1 or 2 catches in his career for Jacksonville. You need, and I'm stumping for training camp Trammell, you need guys like that can possession their way into your lineup and just catch a key ball here or there and then walk back to the sidelines. Got to have those guys.
Yep.
All right, Coach. Good stuff as always. We appreciate it. We will talk you, me, and Leon and Maddie on XL Primetime later. Let's say thanks to Yoda, Jacob, for taking care of us with our stream this morning. Don't forget, every Friday we will be on with you guys either in the 9 or 10 o'clock hour, depending on our tech savvy ability to get on the air on time. We will be around in the 9 or 10 hour, but we totally appreciate it, and we will talk to you later, Coach. We will see you out at Barley and Pie. Barley and Pie on 220 in Fleming Island. So if you guys want to come out for XL Primetime and watch some March Madness like we will, we would definitely love it. All right, we'll talk to you soon.